Welcome to Prairie Hubtech. My name is Jessica Womack and I'm your host today. Prairie Hubtech is a STEM-focused show and we're here to support the local area talent. And Go Greenie is our sponsor. Mom said, eat your greens. Today we have a wonderful show for you. We're going to talk about Drupal and we're also going to talk about CSS and how you can launch your career in coding. Okay, it's time for cyber hygiene. So, 978 million people in 20 countries were affected by cybercrime in 2017, and that number is only on the rise. So how can you keep yourself safe in this world where crime has gone digital? So, tip 1, we're going to talk about spyware. Spyware is a type of malware that gathers sensitive information and relays it to third parties. You might say, what do you mean third parties? So if you use your credit card or if you say your birthday or your weight, that kind of information, it can be sold and that information will be in turn used for advertisements, maybe spam mail. So number 1, don't click on pop-up advertisements. It might seem like, hey, I don't like those advertisements anyways, but sometimes they put an X, but it's not really an X, it's actually launching forward. So the best way to click out of a pop-up is Control-Alt-Delete or use an ad blocker. Tip 2, spyware can add software and change device settings. So one important thing to do is to keep the device and downloaded software updated. So when you're on your computer and there's a pop-up that says, oh, this computer has to update, maybe it seems annoying and you want to restart it later, but actually that is protecting you. Because what hackers they do is they look for vulnerabilities. And most of those vulnerabilities come in people that are not updating their software or updating their computer. So one of the easiest ways to keep yourself safe is to always make sure you're updated on all fronts. And number 3, spyware can come in the form of tracking cookies. Now, you can set your browser to auto-delete all browsing data once it's closed. So if you're going shopping or if you're looking for airplane tickets, it's a really good idea to clean out your browser because that information, companies, they want to know where have you been, where are you going, because they want to craft an advertisement package for you. Also, you can use a firewall to prevent applications from phoning home. So what I mean by phoning home is that if you're on your phone and you're using an app, it can actually connect to the internet, but there's a way to stop it from doing that, where it can only do what you want it to do. And those are our tips today for cyber hygiene. All right, beat on the street. I love this part because we get to say thank you to all of you at home viewing us, sharing, liking our videos, as well as making posts. And we want to say thank you to all of our new Twitter followers. So thank you for following us, and we hope that you continue to share our content. Up next, we have tech support, and we're going to learn about Drupal. For many of you at home, you might say, Drupal? What in the world is Drupal? Well, guess what? If you stay tuned, you'll find out. Welcome to Tech Support. I'm here with Christian Burke. He's a local web developer, and he's going to tell us all about his journey into tech. Welcome, Christian, to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jessica.
Yeah, no worries. So go ahead and tell our viewers at home who you are and how you arrived at your current position.
Sure. I'm Christian Burke. I'm a manager of IT Solutions Development at Creighton.
Awesome.
Part-time instructor at the Metro Community College Code School. And generally a person who tries to be involved in tech as much as possible and the larger Omaha tech community. My journey was pretty circuitous. It started with a master's in poetry, which is a good place to really start coding. Ended up doing PR and marketing for a long time, and then got into coding because, as it happens, a lot of print is going out and a lot of web was coming in. And so the opportunity to work on the web presented itself, and it was the way to communicate in a way that print had been, because I had been a print person for a long time. So as soon as you get involved, it's not one thing. You know, it's not just HTML, it's HTML and CSS, and then it's JavaScript, and then it's CMSs, and then it's frameworks, and then it's libraries, and you start to realize that this is a very deep field, and you could pretty much just do this all the time. And as it turns out, that's what I wanted. You know, I found out that coding, developing for the web, publishing on the web, and being able to communicate with people electronically and create like digital experiences was what I wanted to do.
Wow, so that's pretty awesome, Christian. So you started in poetry, and then you went to print, and then you talked about the yellow brick road of coding, and
Right.
now you're at your current position. I think it's really interesting because it seems like along the way you upskilled. And
Yes.
so sometimes for people, they
Constantly.
can't make the huge leap, but they can make smaller leaps,
Yeah.
and yours seemed very natural. You say, okay, print was going digital, so I migrated with it.
Right.
I stayed with the curve. That's very interesting because some people at home, they're not ready to go cold turkey. So it's
No.
very nice to see how far you've gone and how advanced you've become, just taking it incrementally, naturally.
Totally. I learned at work, largely, what I ended up doing. And I had a great company. I pretty much learned at Creighton, honestly, and they were willing to support me when I'd say, I want to go learn that. And it's an educational institution. But it is not unique to Creighton. I find that when I'm teaching at code school, I mean, we have people from Mutual of Omaha, Kiewit, the Med Center, UNMC. I mean, these corporations care about skilling up their people as well. Sometimes it's a lynda.com class. You know, that's where actually I probably had my first HTML, was I got a free subscription through Adobe. And I was like, well, this looks interesting. And I was hooked.
Wow, that's awesome. So I like how you also talked about some of the big major players in Omaha, as well as the fact that you went to Lynda, like the Omaha Public Library, you can get Lynda for free.
Exactly.
So that's amazing that, yes, these huge companies are making investments, but also you can do it yourself. So you talked about Creighton, you talked about the environment, how they're nurturing you and helping you grow forward. What programming do you use as your day-to-day programming language there?
Sure. PHP. We do a lot of PHP programming because we use a framework called Drupal. Drupal is a PHP-based web CMS. It's also used for application development, but you'll find it has a really strong foothold in education and government, and some corporations as well. Omaha is not a hotbed for PHP. You find it more in the coasts than you do in the Midwest. At least that's what we found, because we have a lot of people we know outside of the Omaha area who are involved in Drupal, and then we have a handful of people in the Omaha area who are involved.
Wow, so that's amazing. So even though, like you're saying, on the coast, it's a pretty big deal, PHP, and using Drupal is within education and government, you still were able to find a pocket here. So you don't have to necessarily, sometimes we think, oh, we have to go to Stockholm, oh, we have to go to San Francisco, because that's where it all is. But actually, you've created your own little nest egg of Drupalites, so I guess you can say
Totally.
Drupalites, here in Omaha. And I think that's really amazing that you were able to get into this language. So how did you get into Drupal itself?
Well, at Creighton, we had a proprietary CMS, and then we went to another open source CMS, and then we went to a third open source CMS, and it was the fourth open source CMS within 4 years. That turned out to be Drupal. And along the way, I got introduced to Drupal 7 at that time, which was the predominant version, and started to learn about it, enjoy it, get a sense of how it worked. I'd actually looked at it, but for a side project when I was volunteering for an organization and making them a website, and I had the option of looking at Joomla or Drupal, and I looked at Drupal and I was like, that's really confusing. I'll go with Joomla. But today, Drupal is no less confusing. It still is a very deep stack with lots of stuff to it. I mean, it's like WordPress in some ways, because while it has a strong core, so much of the functionality is about in Drupal's parlance, modules. In WordPress, you call it plugins, right? So much of what you get out of using it is the fact that people write things that you can use to extend the functionality of the application.
Wow, that's really nice. That's really good because usually when you're talking about modules or plugins, that typically means there's a lot of documentation, there's a lot of adaptation, and also when you're going through your normal code reviews, it also helps create a degree of consistency. Okay, well, so we know we have this module, or if you're WordPress, you have this plugin. So people are pretty familiar with WordPress when you say that, they understand. But you also say CMS. So for back at home, our viewers, what does that mean for them?
CMS is a content management system, and you find these especially at the enterprise level. Although, if you've ever had a WordPress blog, you're familiar with the CMS. You just called it WordPress. But a content management system basically means you don't have to write HTML or CMS to get a web page up on the web. And it generates that for you. You plug in content into fields, hit submit or publish, and then suddenly you've got a website, right?
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. So that's really good because some people, maybe they might not be powerful within HTML, but they know exactly how they want things visualized, or they know what exactly they want on the web page. So this is good. It might give them a degree of flexibility, maybe. So what are the disadvantages to Drupal? And what are the advantages to Drupal?
So one of the things you find if you start talking to people that use Drupal is that you ask somebody, well, you know, how do you sell something on a Drupal site? And they'll tell you there's a module for that. The answer is usually that there are modules for that. So you have an embarrassment of riches. You have so much option that it becomes tricky for you to then do your due diligence and do a kind of thorough analysis of what the options are that are available in order to find the one that's going to work for you. So you imagine if you went to the store and there was one kind of peanut butter, and you're like, well, what kind of peanut butter do I like? I don't care because there's only one. There's not, right? And it's the same with Drupal. You find out pretty quickly, like, there are so many ways to do something that now you have to figure out, well, what's the best way to do something for me? So that's one of the disadvantages. So, you know, it's kind of like, you'd almost want to say, when people ask you what's your weakness, you say I'm a perfectionist. It's kind of like, is it really a weakness? But it is sort of, because, right, you're going to have to spend time in a way that you might not otherwise have to. I would say it is a complex stack. There's a really funny cartoon that's like about the Drupal learning curve, and it really shows like how the curve is more like a waveform and has people like either like falling off it or I don't know.
That would be me.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm just listening. Like,
it is tricky.
Jessica.
Not obvious, but the difference is that, you know, 5 years ago compared to today, while it's no less complicated, it is a lot more aligned with where PHP is going. So Drupal moved to being based on Symfony, which it used to be like a completely proprietary stack, and now it has some underlying technologies that it shares with other PHP frameworks like Laravel or even other CMSs. So you're finding that there's a lot more commonality now, which makes it easier than to find other people that know enough to kind of bridge the gap from where you're at to where you want to go.
Wow, that's awesome. So I like how you switched the disadvantage to an advantage, but in a kind of maybe way. And I also like how you're at least transparent about it, because sometimes we hear, oh, do this language, and you can do it, anyone can do it. But I like how at least you're being transparent with us, saying this is going to take some time, this is going to take some work, some effort. And yes, there might be a spiral, but just as you've proven, you can get over that spiral and you can move forward. So yes, there's lots of options, there's a huge menu, but knowing what to do, what to take, and then just taking it little bits at a time.
Oh yeah.
So that's really wonderful. And before we get ready to end today's segment, I just want to ask you, what kind of advice do you have for those at home, whether they're children, they're grandparents, they're seniors, they're juniors, it doesn't matter, whatever stage in life they're in, and they want to get into maybe tackling PHP, or maybe their company is adopting a type of CMS model. What kind of advice do you have for them?
I think that it's easier today to learn this than it probably ever was. I'll give you an example. Flywheel here in town has a great local development environment that you can download and start building a WordPress site. And the cool thing is you can edit the code directly on your computer and then upload it and send it up to Flywheel to have them host it, which means that you have direct access to the code. You can learn the code on your computer as opposed to add or remove where the code is up on the server and you're like, how do I get to that? This is on your computer. It's a file on your computer. You can open that file, you can edit it, you can see how you broke it or see how you changed it, you know, and that's exciting. I think there are options now that there never were before. And of course, like all of these web-based IDEs, integrated development environments or learning environments like Free Code Camp provides, I mean, those things make things, or CodePen, they make things so much easier to learn.
Wow, that's awesome. And I thank you so much for coming on our show today. And
Thanks
I really love your insight of how you can download the code, you can learn it as you're doing it. Sometimes learning as you're doing is the best way to retain. So wow, you're a wealth of information, Christian. So thank you so much for coming on our show. And if our viewers want to learn more about you, how can they connect with you on social media?
Sure, I can be reached through Twitter, Omaha NE. I was an early Twitter person, I guess, and that's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much. You have a great day, and thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, up next we have Code Camp. We've learned about Drupal, and now we're going to learn about CSS. Welcome back to Prairie Hubtech. It's time for Code Camp. All right, today we're going to learn about CSS. So let's get started with learning the web with Prairie Hubtech. And you might be wondering, what is CSS? Well, I can tell you one thing. It was released December 17th, 1996, and it stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Last week we learned that HTML was basically built the building blocks. It was the fundamentals of web pages. CSS is actually created to describe the content of a web page. Last week we did inline styling with HTML, but this week we're going to talk about CSS and how you can create a style sheet that basically makes HTML so much easier and adaptive. So, what careers use CSS? Well, like HTML, front-end web developers, software engineers, as well as UI UX designers, they use CSS. CSS is really wonderful for those that want to talk about colors or shapes and patterns. They want to make content come to life on a web page, especially those that understand relationships and visuals. This is a very powerful tool for them. So what are some of the benefits of using CSS? Well, one thing is they have selectors, and selectors are easy to maintain and update when changes need to be made to affect a site style. So let's say you're creating a website and your client says, I want my website to be green, and then the next day they call and they say they want their website to be blue. Well, if you're using HTML and you're using your style within HTML, that's actually very hard to do because you have to change every little thing. However, with CSS selectors, you can change the selector and everything that's connected to it changes automatically. Also, it has integration with HTML5. We talked a little bit about HTML5 and how that takes HTML to the next level so you can use video and audio. Well, CSS can be used in conjunction with that. So not only are you using audio and video, but you're making it visually stunning and you're also making it interactive. Speed, it's a lightweight code that improves speed loading, the page loading speed. So when you're loading a website, people tend to not want to wait more than 10 seconds. So it's really important that your page is loading quickly. That way you can retain your customers and your traffic flow. So what are some of the drawbacks of using CSS? Oh my goodness, too many levels. Some developers find it very hard to navigate the multiple levels of CSS. It can actually be kind of drowning at times. And also, it's not seamless. So changes to CSS materialize in various ways depending on the browser that you're using. If you're using Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, actually it changes the way it looks in all the browsers. So when you're creating things, you have to make sure you're looking at every single browser and how that manifests, and also the different versions make it look different too. So not all blues are blues, not all greens are greens. And it can be touchy. Small mistakes can have great impacts on a web page. It's very unforgiving. I remember the first time I started using CSS and I made one little mistake and it looked like my computer had vomited on itself. There was things everywhere, so it's a very unforgiving language, so you have to be very careful. So let's get into some examples. So today we're going to learn how to use element selectors using CSS, also how to use internal styles within CSS, and we're going to create some colors with CSS, as well as creating borders around our titles. So let's go ahead and let's get started. All right, so the first thing that we have in front of us is we're going to learn how to use a text selector. So just like under HTML, you're seeing some similar things. You're seeing your HTML, your doc type, your head. We're going to stay here in the style tab. So before we were in the body, but now we're going to be in the style. So this P, inside this P, we have text align. The text align, this just means your alignment, just like on your Microsoft Word, your center, left, your right. So just to prove it, we're going to put left here. We'll see what happens. So I want all my text to align to the left. Aha, it works. So simple. Now let's move it back to the center, because we want to be the center of attention, right? All right, so now color. We have it as red. You know, I love green, so we're going to change it to green. And let's see what happens. Wow, so simple. So what we're doing with here is the CSS. In the past, we actually used it within HTML. So anytime anything is connected to this P, so we're looking here, this P tag, we have let's learn how to use a text selector. Our ID is paragraph 1. So let's try to change one of these to a P1, and let's see what happens when we change just one of these. See, all of a sudden, now the style no longer applies. So very simple, and it's very powerful. So be responsible. Okay, next let's talk about some background colors. So right now we have a linen color. It's very pretty, and we're going to change it to blue. Once again, let's try press run. Now it's blue. Now we can turn it back to, let's see, pink. Pink is cool. Now it's pink. So what we're doing is we're looking at the body, and what this represents is the background color of the body, which is this background area right here. Everything we put here after the colon is going to be that color. So if I say pink, if I say blue, if I say green, it's going to change that. Now let's look at H1. So H1, before last week learned HTML, H1 is our heading. So this is where we say Prairie Hubtech. Now I can actually change this. The color is maroon. Well, let's say purple. All right, it's purple. And these 40px, these are the pixels. This is how big I want it. So the really wonderful thing is that there is a heading size, so it has its own intuitive sizing. However, I can change that with CSS. So let's try 50 pixels. It's even bigger. And pixels, some people use pixels. It just depends on your business case if they want you to use pixels or not. Some people are very anti-pixels just because it can represent itself in different ways on screens. So it's good to note that. All right, so now let's talk about our background colors. And just like last week, I'm using a W3 Schools tutorial, and I'm also using their inline coding program. It's really wonderful because you don't have to download anything, and it's just right here, easy for you to use. So let's look here. We're in the body, and we have an H1 and we have H2. Remember, as the numbers go up, the size goes down. It's opposite. So we're looking at our style, and it's the background color, and it says tomato, and we're going to change tomato to blue. And you might say, tomato is not a color. Well, in CSS, tomato is a color. And you can make Dodger blue, you can do Laker purple. I mean, it's really fun, some of the colors that people come up with. And you can also do your own colors as well. If you have a brand, you can use CSS, and it's very powerful because you can create your own personalized colors. So now we know how to change the background. And the background is actually connected to the heading. So let's say I have a website and I want to do some separations of space. I don't have to change the background color. I can just change the heading and people know, okay, we're moving to a different section. All right, and let's look at border style. So borders can get pretty crazy. You can have dash borders, dotted borders, bolded borders, colored borders. I mean, there's just borders everywhere. So one thing we're gonna do a dashed border. So we're here and it's p.dashed, and we're gonna put in our style, and the border style is dashed. It's very easy, especially if you're a native English speaker. It's very natural. And then our H2, so that is the type of heading that we're gonna have. The style is background color green. So that's our background color right there. And we're saying code school and too many borders, a dash border. So let's just change this to a dotted just to prove a point. We're gonna change this to dotted, and we're gonna change this to dotted. And let's see, p.dotted. All right, let's see what happens. Now it's dotted. I can actually change it in here. That's pretty cool. So now you know how to do it. Now you know how to create a border. You also know about using text selectors and how to use internal styles, as well as their background colors. So when you're at home and you're learning and you're doing this, these are super quick, very easy tutorials. I mean, W3 Schools is probably my go-to. I don't know any developer who hasn't utilized them before, and they're very easy to use and navigate. And like I said, you can use their online coding script editor. So we hope that you add us, like us, subscribe us, show us your pictures, your posts, and let us know what you're coding at home. And if you enjoyed today's code challenge, go ahead and like us on Facebook, Instagram, as well as Pinterest and LinkedIn. We want to learn about what you did at home. What are your side projects? How did you use CSS? So go ahead and show us how you created element selectors, did internal styling, as well as changed the background color using CSS. We want to know, so share it with us. Okay, it's time to get outdoors and get into the community. It's our community calendar shout out. On November 5th, we have Nebraska JS Omaha, and that's held at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Nebraska. It's a wonderful way to network, and it's a wonderful way to learn about what's happening in the community. On November 7th, we have Omaha Women in Machine Learning and Data Science. Yes, women can code too. So go ahead and go out there and support and see what's going on in the Women in STEM community. Also, on November 12th, Google Developer Group. It's their monthly meeting. So if you want to know about what's happening at Google, what they're doing, what's going on with Android, go to this group and learn and get immersed. Also, November 15th, we have a panel discussion. It's the local data science trends, challenges, and opportunities. This is a really wonderful group because you can learn, you can discuss, and there's some really wonderful experts within the Omaha area that you can definitely dig into. So I hope that you leave the couch this weekend and you go out and you find all these new groups, and while you're at it, take some pictures and tag us to it. Can't get enough Prairie Hubtech? Well, guess what? We are available on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So you can get all of your heart's content of Prairie Hubtech. Go ahead, like us, subscribe, add us, mention us, tag us. We love it, and we hope you have a wonderful day. And until then, keep on coding.